Welcome to the program, Ed. I'm looking forward to chatting today.
Hey, welcome, Simon. It's glad to be here and happy to be talking to you.
I always start by asking my guests, what brought you to Treasury and why did you choose Treasury as your career?
Sure. I think, like many others, I didn't quite seek out a career in Treasury. I kind of wound up here as my career passions became clearer to me, and frankly, it became a natural progression into Treasury. I think in some ways, Treasury is a lot like insurance. I want to say that no one, but I think few people start out saying that they want to be in the insurance business. But I think as with Treasury, as people learn more about the industry and the discipline and the exciting career opportunities that are there, I think ultimately they're more open to it. The unique, being a part of this unique community. I really appreciated financial services and banking in particular, and had the good fortune of being introduced to it, via various internships that ultimately translated into an opportunity at JP Morgan. And although I didn't kind of come from an accounting background, those experiences there made me more comfortable navigating financial statements and financial strategy, which then became a natural segue to Treasury. So early on at JP Morgan, I found myself working, in some Treasury-related areas that gave me a good understanding of capital and balance sheet management and M&A, among other things. And for me, being kind of at the center of some of the biggest decisions in a company's life cycle, that really resonated with me and made it so that it became a place where I wanted to spend a good part of my career. So knowing that at the time I didn't want to be a banker my whole life, because I think it required a sales skill set that I just didn't think I really had developed enough. Treasury was just a natural pathway for me after banking.
So just for the guests listening, you spent 7 years with JP Morgan on the coverage side, focused on insurance clients. You then moved into the insurance side in a broad finance role before you moved to Liberty Mutual in investor relations, and then naturally progressed into the treasurer role from there. So in terms of your background, what would you say have been the highlights so far in your mind, Ed?
Sorry, Simon, you broke up there on me. I don't know if it was my connection or yours.
What would you say have been the highlights of your career so far in your mind?
Sure. Well, I think, I've had the good benefit of being able to be at a large organization like JP Morgan and Liberty Mutual, and also as a startup. So I think I've have been able to cover quite a bit of ground. And I think at ProSite, which was the startup insurance company that I was a part of, the nice thing about that was that I was able to be a part of something from the ground up. So myself and the rest of the finance team were, able to kind of access the debt markets for the first time for the company. We built the planning process from the ground up, shifted the investment strategy to incorporate private equity investments. And I think in the round really, became true business partners as a finance function for the organization, which I think added a lot of value. And then at Liberty, being a larger organization, we had different issues, more macro issues to tackle in nature. And one highlight for me has been the work that we've done to reassess our capital structure and provide the organization with increased financial flexibility in the last couple of years. I think a few years ago, we took a step back and reassessed our capital structure. And in a way, we're looking to get back to first principles. And by that, I mean, we were asking ourselves what our target, debt to equity ratio should be. We were thinking about, what the profile of our debt structure should look like, all kind of with the idea of, adding, more financial flexibility for the organization. Whether that be to take on a defensive posture to protect against stress scenarios, or to set us up for a more offensive organic or inorganic capital deployment. So I think in the end, we've extended our weighted average maturity across our debt stack. We've tilted the currency mix a little bit more towards euro offering to better mimic our balance sheet, our future balance sheet, and reduce cost. And this past month, we actually closed on a fairly innovative transaction in hybrid capital raise that was actually the first of its kind, which helped improve our capital position overall for the organization. And it's given us a lot of optionality in our capital structure, and really increase their financial flexibility. So that's all been very exciting for us at Liberty.
Ed, was it a challenge moving from the investment banking coverage side to the corporate side in Treasury?
Oh, absolutely. In banking, you're working as a part of small deal teams in pressurized situations, in tight time frames, and working 100+ hours a week, and that's in the normal course. So transitioning to industry where you're part of a business, and you have to take those theoretical kind of questions and apply them in a very tangible way to be a valued business partner. And those are big differences. But I will say that a background in banking will position you well for that, for a career in Treasury. And I think that's both, whether you're looking at a product group or a coverage group. I think in many ways it's an advanced degree in financial strategy and financial management. And if you think of the treasurer role as one, that is very strategic, as one that is really kind of about being a business partner, all those skills are really highly valued. Additionally, I think as a treasurer or a treasury as a function, you have to communicate with your investors. You have to communicate with rating agencies, and all those skills I think you really get a good sense for in banking. So I think you're very well prepared. You just have to be kind of going in that you are going to have to make that pivot in terms of how you're working and how you're building your team as well.
And for you, obviously, you dealt with insurance clients, so it was a natural progression across. I get asked a lot from bankers, how do I make this jump across? What would be your advice for others on the way to actually make that move from banking into the corporate side?
Sure. I think you have to really have a strong network, first and foremost, and you have to also understand how kind of the organization itself and leadership itself is set up. One thing that a lot of bankers wind up having to do is to prove that they can play in that sandbox, right? Because the team dynamics in industry are very different from what they are in banking, and you have to be able to communicate to folks that you're ready to make that change, and you have to be able to articulate that. And it helps also to have someone who understands the value that you can bring, because it is a different skill set, right? It is more strategic. You're not going to be adding value to, say, a systems implementation, right? But you can add value in other areas, and you have to be able to lean on those strengths, right? And frankly, the organization that you're speaking to has to have that need, right? If they already have, a strong capital markets function or a very strong M&A function, then your ability to add value will be somewhat diminished, right? So I think you have to have that in mind as well as you're talking to prospective employers.
Ed, what's been your approach to networking over your career and advice to others?
I'll share this, Simon. Probably my first lesson in networking came from a holiday party I was at JP Morgan. And I remember, as maybe 3-4 years into my career, I was huddled around with a few other analysts, and we were just, talking, about whatever the topic of the day was for us as, mid 20-year-old analysts. And the CFO of JP Morgan happened to be milling about and kind of sauntered over to our circle and just started chatting with us. And everybody kind of froze up a little bit for a second, right? The CFO of JP Morgan, everybody be on your best behavior. And what I think I learned and took from that encounter was that, he's a person just like everybody else. And we struck up a conversation. He said to the group of us, hey, if you ever want to chat or pull up and talk about anything, just ping my EA and we'll have a conversation. And I was actually, either naive enough or bold enough to actually take him up on that. And 6 months later, I was in his massive office, just having a conversation with him about his career, about what I was looking to do. And, that ultimately was instrumental in me getting my next role at JP. And it all came about of this conversation with someone who, if someone else would have said, listen, you should reach out to the CFO, I said, well, he's probably too busy, he doesn't have time, or how can I be helpful to him, or why would he want to talk to me? And we kind of developed a relationship, and I was able to share with him some of my own perspectives on how I saw my own little small job, right, which I think he appreciated on some level. And he was also able to really kind of coach me up on what I should look for in career opportunities.
I think there's a really good lesson in there for listeners, in that it doesn't matter how senior someone is or how busy you think that they're going to be. People are always open to helping and to having conversations, aren't they?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I try to pass that learning on. And I think it's hard for people to kind of really internalize that. And whenever I'm talking in front of folks, I always say, listen, please feel free to reach out, and you'll get a ping or two, but it could be more, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Definitely. Have mentors played a part in your career so far, Ed?
For sure. And I would say that especially so when I've been considering big career moves. When I left banking, I remember reaching out to one of my mentor sponsors, and whatever term you want to use, and at the time I was kind of going down the path of, I know I don't want to be in banking, I want to be in the insurance industry. And I had a very singular focus. I said, I want to work for a large institution, and I want to go in as, an M&A person, or a corporate development person, or an IR person, and then ultimately kind of progress through that career. And what he was able to do for me, which was very important at the time, and I still value, he made me kind of question that answer and really question why I thought that way. And in so doing, what he made me realize was that probably more important for me was, at the time, right, very specific advice for where I was in my career, was that I should be looking for a wider array of responsibility and opportunity. And it's really how I wound up at the startup company, because it gave me a chance to learn a lot more disciplines, to really understand insurance in a way that I wouldn't have understood had I gone to a larger organization and been a little bit more focused in my role immediately. So I kind of went down that path at ProSite, had responsibility for planning and capital raising and our investment portfolio, dabbled in reinsurance before I left. So really got exposure to a lot of different disciplines. And I think without having that more holistic experience and background, I don't think I would have been as prepared for the treasurer role when it ultimately came around for me.
Absolutely. Ed, if you were to go back to 25 when you started out your career, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you'd known back then?
I think I was somewhat risk averse early on in my career. And that might have been born out of a fairly kind of linear thought process in terms of how I thought careers developed, right? So, early 20s, me probably thought, all right, well, if I'm at JP Morgan in a treasury role, then I'm a junior analyst, and then I'm a senior analyst, and then a manager, a director, et cetera, and then, hopefully one day you wake up and you're leading, a specific function. And I think in reality, like some people say, right, a career is more a lattice than it is a ladder, right? And sometimes the lessons that you can take from stretch assignments or from, a horizontal step in your career can be really fun, foundational in how you can develop as a leader. And that, being open to jumping around, being open to not thinking so linearly early on, I think can really position you to be more well-rounded ultimately, and have a more diverse toolkit and perspective as you get further on and you're approaching, organizational problems, which require just a more complex way of thinking.
Ed, when you're looking to hire into your team, what are the key things that you're after within the team?
Yeah. Well, I think technical skills are table stakes, right? I think you have to have some level of knowledge that you're going to draw on, right? But beyond that, I want people who can think strategically and communicate difficult concepts very clearly. And as my predecessor at Liberty would say, could handle pressurized situations with a fair bit of grace. Treasury, it varies across different companies, but I think one of the common things for it across the industry is that you're generally speaking with, the C-level, you're speaking with investors, rating agencies, board members. And so you're really part of the face of the organization. And you have to tell that story, answer difficult questions. So I want to know that whoever I'm hiring can navigate those high pressure situations in a very constructive way, right? It can really kind of set the stage for, what our company is doing. The other thing that I would say I look for is, I think people sometimes overvalue prior experience and think about who to hire and how to promote folks. I think that's relevant, but I also like to consider what that person is going to do and what they can do, right? And how we can develop them. And I like to think that, I haven't been afraid to promote or hire someone into a new role if they don't check all of those boxes, right? And really kind of think about their development, years out in front. So.
Absolutely. What makes a successful treasurer in the eyes of the C-suite in your mind, Ed?
I think a couple of things. I think first and foremost, you have to be a real business partner and truth teller, right? As part of the advisory team of the CFO, telling the organization, hard truths is critical. And I think as treasurer, and if within the treasurer function, if you do have responsibility over capital, I think that's also very critical, right? Helping the organization make trade-offs across different business units or different products, and understanding how to drive overall value for the organization, how to create value, how to think about themselves relative to peers and appropriately position themselves in a competitive landscape are all, I think, the biggest ways in which treasurers can be real partners to CFOs and their board.
How do you see the role of the treasurer changing in the coming years? I mean, technology is moving so quickly. How do you see that the role of the treasurer changing on that behalf?
No, that's a very true statement, Simon. And I don't know if the role of the treasurer is changing as much as kind of Treasury itself is changing and kind of the operations, right? I think the role will continue to be strategic. It'll continue to be part of the face of whatever company you're working at. But I think how Treasury works and Treasury operations specifically is definitely evolving. Whether it be, how you're managing different vendors as you're looking to kind of provide better value to your ultimate customers. In-source, outsource decisions are critical. Picking the right systems, right? With Treasury, e-payments is something that is critical for insurance companies and outside of insurance companies as well. So navigating that environment and the potential risks that come with it, I think are very important. So I think I almost also go back to how I think about hiring, promoting folks, right? I want people who are agile, who can be strategic, because the nature of the work is changing, and I want to make sure that I'm putting the right people in place so that they can manage those changes and how Treasury itself is kind of evolving.
Ed, it's been a pleasure chatting. Thank you very much for coming on the program. I've really had a great time today chatting with you.
Thank you very much, Simon.